All right. Y'all ready for Zeitgeist? Post in the
Zeitgeist.
chat if you're ready for Zeitgeist. It's now
Zeitgeist.
time to shift from talking about breaking news to talking about bigger trends that are easy to overlook. But if you understand how culture is changing, you can skate to where the puck is headed. So this is a historic moment. Because up to this point, I have brought all of the Zeitgeist stories, but this Zeitgeist story has been brought by none other than Jonathan Sugar, which means that it's probably going to be about the Marines.
Prepare to have your geist zited.
All right, so what is our Zeitgeist story this week, Jonathan?
This past week, there was kind of a seminal moment in the United States military. We haven't seen something like this for 20 years. First, you guys know that the Department of Defense was renamed to the Department of War, reflecting the outlook on it by the new, well, he was SecDef at the time, Secretary of Defense. Now he is SecWar, Secretary of War. SecWar Pete Hegseth summoned all the generals and senior NCOs from across the world to come to Quantico, Virginia, and sit down in an auditorium, and he gave them a speech. And you can find this speech on YouTube. It's about 49 minutes long.
I watched the whole thing, and I was eating popcorn
it several times.
and
so
pumping
good.
my fist.
So good. I rewatched it again to see the expressions of people in the crowd. Basically, this speech covered 10 different changes that SecWar is making to the military. Overall, it means the days of DEI are gone. We are no longer, and as he said, we are no longer the Department of Woke. We are the Department of War. Physical standards have been reset to age-normed, gender-neutral tests. Every uniformed member, from the newest private to the highest general, is to take a PT test and a height weight check twice a year. And I realize most of you didn't realize that wasn't happening for generals. Once you hit a certain rank, you show up to the scale and be like, put these numbers in, and then you walk off. Now SecWar is like, get on the scale.
Him fat shaming all of the generals to their faces.
My goodness.
I've been wanting to hear Jonathan's take, because my assumption is every enlisted man was like stood up and started cheering, because people like to see their leaders held to the same standards they're held to. The whole rules for thee but not for me is not morale inspiring. But this shift, I suspect, played really well with the E5s and below.
There's a couple of other things that were brought up. Now, this was the fun stuff, right? It's like, no more fat generals, no more fat admirals, you know, stuff like, no more dudes in dresses, which is something that he said, okay? So that's something that's easy to focus on because it's funny and fun, okay? But really the big thing here was that zero defect culture is going away. Zero defect culture means you can't ever make a mistake. If you make a mistake that goes into paperwork, your career is destroyed, because then someone else who has zero defect will be elevated above you. And so in this officer corps, it's impossible to get ahead unless you play it safe, because it produces risk-averse policies. So instead of a captain who will, you know, take his company out on an exploratory patrol and check for bad guys in a certain area, instead he'll hold them back until he's told to do so by someone else that he can shift the blame on, because he does not want to have a black mark in his record if he takes too many casualties. Something that could mark your record is also suicides, which is not really anything you can control at all unless you have an extraordinarily toxic unit that you're running. This zero defect culture is extremely toxic to military culture, because it makes all of our officers who are supposed to be commanding us into risky situations, it means that they no longer have the safety to do so. There's no safety net. There's no forgiveness. There's nothing. So now we have a bunch of checklists.
Yeah, let me jump in with an example of a general who would have failed under the previous system. And it was a man by the name of George Washington. Back when he was a colonel in the Continental Army, he marched his unit out into the middle of nowhere and built Fort Necessity. And I know a lot about this because as a homeschool kid, I may have built a model of Fort Necessity out of Legos.
Of course you did.
For a school project. And the mistake that Colonel Washington made was when he was clearing the land for Fort Necessity, so they're chopping down all these trees, he only cleared enough trees to build the fort, but he didn't clear trees all the way out to musket range. And so when the French and Indians attacked, they were able to take cover from the tree line while they were attacking the fort, thereby thwarting the whole point of building a fort in the first place, which is to have cover yourself while denying it
Yeah.
to the enemy. Now, here's the thing. George Washington ended up being a fantastic general. And if they had screened him out because he made that one mistake, we probably wouldn't be a country right now. He was uniquely equipped and empowered to be exactly the general we needed for the Revolutionary War, which was fought 10 or 15 years later.
So now we're looking at a shift back to practical results only. In the military, the term uses lethality. Every MOS or every job in the armed forces is to contribute to the mission's accomplishment and the lethality of the combat arms branch. In Sec War's speech, he talked about the focus is now on destroying the enemy. It is no longer a place for DEI candidates to be promoted based on unique points like first this, first that. Now it's to be the best. And if you are the best, it doesn't matter what color you are, what gender you are, whatever it is, you are to be elevated to an appropriate station so that we can have the best and most lethal United States military possible. Okay. Now, how does this apply to authors? This is a huge cultural shift. You have to understand the officer corps is formed of college graduates. So all of them are filtered into the military from college. And so this is where a lot of problems come from, is because our universities haven't been fantastic at producing qualified individuals. So many stories that authors work on come from the American military tradition. And right now we have a huge surge in recruitment because people love Sec War Pete Hegseth right now. There's a huge surge in recruitment, which means there's a huge surge in recruits who appreciate military stories and their families who appreciate military stories. So you need to have now an understanding of the way the military culture is transforming, because you could be interacting with people who are now in the military, and it's a new military.
And more fundamentally, as we've been talking about the turnings, this is a kind of inevitable outcome of the turning that we're in, which is bad times make strong men, and what Pete Hegseth is advocating for is basically the military becoming strong.
Yes.
In a literal sense. It's like, no, you have to be able to do the push-ups, even if you're a general. You have to be able to do
in the
PT.
speech.
Yeah.
Do hard PT every day. And then in basic training, we're getting rid of hazing, to a reasonable extent. Racism and sexual harassment are still illegal. But now drill instructors can swear. Did you know that it was illegal for drill instructors to swear at their recruits for a period of time? It's like, what? They can't do bunk tossing anymore. Well, now they can, and now they can put hands on recruits, which I'm telling you, some recruit platoon woke up this morning and got reintroduced to the new military.
They're suddenly becoming strongmen. It's interesting because I was reading some reports from World War II about the training that they went through and the boot camps that they went through, and their drill instructors back then were very mean, very aggressive. You can watch Band of Brothers for an account of this. But the troops going through basic did not resent their instructors for yelling at them.
We brag about it.
Because they knew they were going to war. And they would rather suffer in basic and have everybody around them suffer in basic than to go and face the Germans or the Japanese surrounded by a whole bunch of people who did not suffer in basic and couldn't make it, right? Because it's the people that difficult times weed out that can't make it through basic, that you don't want as the weak link in your unit. And in the 101st Airborne, part of the appeal, which is what the Band of Brothers TV show focused on, if you get the DVDs, you'll see like interviews with the actual men who served. They interviewed a lot of them. And one of the reasons some of those guys volunteered for the 101st Airborne rather than being regular infantry, it's because they wanted the extra money. But a lot of them volunteered because they wanted to be around a more elite unit because they thought they would have higher survivability.
Right.
Because they wanted to be around experts and warriors. And this standard of, would you want this for your son? Would you want this for your grandson, that Hegseth was pointing out, is a whole kind of realignment. Because it used to be, we didn't want to offend the enemy. right? That's why we
Right.
renamed it from Department of War to Department of Defense. The Korean War wasn't a war, it was a police action, right? It was the era of weak men. And the era of weak men has come to an end. And the era of offensive men, of strong men, men who impose their will on others, has come. And this, I think, is really important for protagonists, because we're already seeing this in romantasy, where women are longing for the men who impose their will on others style male character, right? That's kind of the whole point of these dark fantasies, and they take it to an extreme, a very unhealthy and disordered extreme. But it gives you a sense of what the longing is for, and we're seeing this in other genres as well. Seth Ring, who I've read a lot of his books, his protagonists are very much the man who imposes his will on others style protagonists. Very, very strong male characters, very dominant male characters. Now he's writing for a male audience, but it's that same kind of thing of like, people are wanting to read about strong men who aren't afraid to be offensive. And we're also seeing this in the political discourse right now, where people are being portrayed in sombreros, right? The sombrero memes will stop once the government is reopened. And it's like, it used to be, it's like, oh, that's offensive, you're offending me. And now it's like, I don't really care, Margaret, right? The era of strong men has come. And it's interesting because we're seeing this transformation happening in both political parties. So the weak leaders are getting pushed out, and the Republicans did this first, but the Democrats are in the process of doing this as well. So Zoran Mondani, who's running and likely going to win for mayor, was the strongest man in the race, and so his politics are, he's a socialist, right? He's basically a communist, but he's the strongest man. And we see the same thing with Gavin Newsom, who is very much a chameleon, and he's whatever the current times require. And so the face that he's now wearing is the strong man who gets into fights and pokes fun. And he's constantly like posting memes on X using AI to mock political figures, which is, I believe, in clear violation of a law that he signed just like 2 years ago or last year, that you're not allowed to do that. But he's very much now presenting himself as a strong man because he believes that that's what the electorate wants. And so if you have a kind of a weak, effeminate, unassuming, inoffensive male characters in your novels, you may find that those don't resonate like they did, right? So it's not the time of Mr. Banks learning to be weak. It's now the time of Davy Crockett, who must be strong because the times are difficult, right? Mr. Banks could be weak because he was living in a very safe time. And
you also have Karate Kid stories where someone who is weak is transformed by someone who is strong into someone who is strong. And those are going to do very well also. Like I know so many guys, when you join the military, particularly the Marine, I'll reserve it to the Marine Corps, okay? Because people will join the other branches for different reasons, okay? They will join for college or healthcare. The Marine Corps is too freaking hard, and it advertises itself as too freaking hard to go in for benefits, okay? The pay is just not good enough. But the way you're being rewarded is in self-respect, in confidence, and knowing that you did it. And so actually, in the Marine Corps, the harder training is and the worse you get treated, the more of a selling point that becomes. So, you know, you can tell the story about the time your drill instructor threw you into a washing machine because you were a bag of garbage, and he mistook you for, you know, a bag of filthy laundry, which they use a different term.
Yeah. People actually want to apply for the Navy SEALs, which has the most miserable training in the Navy. Now, going back to what I was saying earlier, a lot of people are pointing out that Zoran Mondani couldn't bench press very much. So he did this big thing. They were working out, and it's in the middle of a street, and he's trying to bench press, and he couldn't. And I think this really supports my argument, because how much a politician could bench press was not something that voters cared about in 2018. But now they really do, right? RFK doing his bench pressing in the middle of the street in New York, very similar situation to Zoran Mondani, became like a key selling point. He's like, look, here I am. I am a strong man, physically strong. Now, the kind of strength I'm talking about, it's not necessarily physical strength, although it is that in some cases, but it's more of what Democrat voters are wanting is strong candidates who will stand up to Trump and not give them an inch, right? That's why the government is shut down right now, because they're unwilling to compromise, even to not stop filibustering a bill that basically changes nothing, right? Just a clean continuing resolution that was the last numbers, but today, even that they're not doing, because the voters are wanting that strength, they're wanting that fight, they're wanting that grit, and I think they're wanting that in the books that they read as well.
Yeah. So, and this is on both sides, okay? Whether you're on the conservative or you're on the liberal side, your heroes need to have a line they will not allow others to cross. And then they need to have the capacity to prevent that line from being crossed, whether it's physically, magically, socially, whatever it is. Your hero, your protagonist needs to have the this far, no further kind of mentality.
Your protagonist needs to impose his will in the like on somebody or on some situation in the very first pages. Like, you need to demonstrate this is a strong protagonist. Yes, he's going to go through this evolution, he's going to have various crises, but if he's weak and lame, and kind of learns to become strong, and that's kind of the arc of the story, you've got to really compensate for his weak and lameness in your marketing, and really say, hey, he's not going to be this weak lame character the whole book. Otherwise, I think readers are going to lose interest, unlike before. This is not the time to write a book like Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
I was just thinking that. I was about to say, this is not the time.
That is a third turning book.
Because that's
we're now in the fourth turning.
Yeah, that's when strong people have become the bad guys, right? Because they've had strength and now they're using it to oppress and abuse. Okay. Now people are actually looking for strength to break the abusive system. And that's what they're looking for. Okay, Justin, dude. All right. I can't tell you how many stories I know of guys who joined the Marine Corps because of a girl and they became strong. so girls are making us stronger.
But I will say, in defense of Johnny Rico, he still showed strength standing up to his dad right at the very beginning. So he had that more. So while he didn't have physical strength, he did show a moral strength to buck against everything that he was brought up to believe. And this is actually a really good example for your story. So let's say your story is about a man becoming physically strong. You need to show him being strong morally. Or let's say the story is about a man becoming morally strong. You need to show him early being strong physically, right?
Yes.
He needs to have some kind of strength that makes
theme
him an
of strength
character early. Otherwise, you're not going to have an appealing character. And readers, if it's your first book of yours that they're reading, they're not going to give you patience for the beautification of an irritating protagonist.
Correct.
They need to fall in love with your protagonist pretty early on.
So Captain America. Okay, remember the movie Captain America?
Great
weak
example.
Kid, strong soul.
Yes.
His morals were extremely strong. And then the theme of the thing was when you got the Vita Meta Vegemin, whatever they put into him. When he got whatever. When he got that injected into him, it took what was inside and made it appear on the outside. So he became a strong warrior for the rights of others based off of his earlier strength that he showed. He just lacked the physicality for it. And they spent the first third of that movie showing how strong he was in his soul, so that when he is given the strength and then puts it against Red Skull later on, who takes the exact same thing, then you see the difference between them. And that's a fantastic way of doing that. You can have a physically weak protagonist, but he has to be strong in his morals, soul, whatever.
Now contrast this with Iron Man, who's a strong character intellectually, but a weak character morally.
Yes.
And every Iron Man story is about Tony Stark learning to gain moral strength, right? So the first one, it's him learning how to sacrifice and become a hero. And it's kind of that same arc, actually. He goes through a very similar arc in every film.
Thor starts out being morally weak, or maturity weak. He's immature. He's very strong. He does have a good sense of right and wrong. He's just not good at listening to his dad, hearing what his dad has to say.
Yeah.
And so the end of the movie fixes that, because he gets his humility, and that's when he gets his strength back, and he's able to be the hero that Asgard and that town in New Mexico needed.
Yeah. So Thor's character is about him learning to gain wisdom. And you'll notice that Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, those characters have stood the test of time and they're still appealing today. Whereas Shang-Chi, you haven't thought about him in forever, right?
Nah.
And he doesn't have that same kind of appeal because he doesn't go through that same kind of arc. And so as you're putting together characters, decide on purpose, how are they going to be strong and how are they going to be weak? And you can play, and these are three really different examples of three different characters who are strong in very different ways. And then when they come together, it's very interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're all in the middle of their journey, right? Iron Man's learning to become a hero, and in the first Avengers film, he does the self-sacrifice thing. Thor is learning to become wise, and Captain America is learning to Captain America actually doesn't go through much of an arc.
He holds.
Film. Yeah, he's kind of the core that everything else is orbiting around. And
Yeah.
not every character has to go through an arc in every story. But we are in the hard times make strong men era. And this makes people uncomfortable. It makes weak men uncomfortable. And one of the shifts I think we're going to see in corporate America, and we'll close with this, is in weak times, you have lots of committees where decisions are made by consensus. And the companies that are going to win are the companies where strong men or strong leaders are given authority to make decisions without needing consensus from the group. And a good example of this is the Elon Musk companies, right? Why was xAI able to outmaneuver all of the other AI companies in such a short period of time? Because Elon Musk doesn't run his companies with committees.
Yeah.
In consensus. He hires the very best people and he gives them the authority to make decisions and he gives them freedom to fail. So when they have a rocket that goes up and explodes, they see that as a learning opportunity and they launch another market, which actually connects with Jonathan's point about this zero defect culture. And because they're iterating so much faster, I saw a stat that something like 80% of all of the kilograms put in space are now delivered on a SpaceX rocket of some kind. So they've now taken 80% market share of space. He did it.
That's pretty cool.
And that's really impressive. And he was winning in electric cars, and his social network is doing well. And so a leader who had the same leadership philosophy was Nebuchadnezzar. And he's the head of gold, right? Described in the Bible, he has this dream where he's the head of gold, the greatest of all the civilizations. And he would give a lot of authority and a lot of power to someone and a lot of leniency to do what they needed to do. But once he decided that they were no good, he would just have them executed, right? He would cover them with gold if they were successful. He'd have them executed if they weren't, but they had all of the authority to make the decisions themselves. And that's the only kind of person who's drawn to that sort of role is a strong man. A weak man wants to hide behind a committee where it's like, well, we don't really, decisions were made, mistakes were made, right? We don't know who made the mistakes. They were made by the kind of generic other, and they're hiding behind that committee. And the age of that is coming to an end.
Everyone hates that and has hated that this whole time. It has never been good. So every time you present that as a villain or as an antagonistic force in your novel, that the bad guy is trying to hide behind something else because he doesn't have the courage and conviction to stand up for his own words, for his own actions or whatever. He's trying to push it off on someone else and trying to weasel out of it. You know, this is similar to Wormtongue in Two Towers, where Grima is behind the throne, forcing, enchanting the king to make the policy happen, and then he can blame the king for whatever is going on. It is not until the strong man comes in, Gandalf, who cast out, and they have a full-on bar brawl in there. You just have, the elf, the dwarf, and the man walking around socking dudes in the jaw with their bare hands.
An elf, a dwarf, and a man walk into a bar.
Exactly. And they're just trucking these guys. This is so totally cool. And because they tried to disarm them and it didn't matter. And Gandalf still went in and he still freed the king. And that is so important to readers because they are entrapped still in a system that relies on committees and policies and checkboxes. And, well, you said the wrong thing. It got caught on TikTok. You're gone. You know, people are finding out about that with the Charlie Kirk thing. Okay, I'm in favor of free speech. You don't like Charlie Kirk? You know, you can say whatever you want to say, and that's your First Amendment right. Now, I think you're wrong, but you got the right to be wrong. That's why America's cool. And they're getting hammered with a system that's been weaponized against them now. And that no one likes that system. It's not a good system. And so people being able to stand up and back up their own words is a freedom we need back.